right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the West Virginia University workshop for the fall competition. So welcome today. Thank you all for being here. I'm very excited to get this kicked off for you. We're going to be talking about the business model canvas. We're going to be talking about research, customer discovery, all kinds of things. So we have a couple of different sections based on our speakers today. So as we go along, if you have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, ask those questions. If you don't feel comfortable talking out loud, you can certainly send a question in the chat. And I'm going to let our speakers introduce themselves today. So first, let's kick it off with Dallas. Thank you for speaking today.
Thank you. I am Dallas Smollett, so I am the program manager for the Ancova Center. You get probably a lot of emails from me. I'm the one who's helping you guys in completing the process for the business plan competition.
Thanks, Dallas. And Dallas created this PowerPoint presentation for us, so thank you very much. You're keeping us cool. All right, next up, we have Dr. Carrie White. Welcome to the show.
Why, thank you, Tara. Hi, everybody. Congratulations on making it to semifinals. Excited to see you all here. I am the executive director for the Morris L. Hayhurst Launch Lab, which is really our applied innovation center for all students from every university. So we'll be helping to coach you and to lead you through the business plan process. So welcome.
All right, thanks, Carrie. Ann Jones, up next.
Hey, thank you, Tara. Thank you, Carrie and Dallas. Hi, I'm Ann Jones. I am a business advisor in the Morris L. Hayhurst Launch Lab, and I'm also a director in entrepreneurship for Startup West Virginia, which is a program that's part of WVU that works with startup businesses all over the state. So I've been able to work with a lot of you as a business coach in the past, and I look forward to working with some of you again, and I really look forward to getting to know a lot of you in the future.
Thanks, Ann. Appreciate you being here today. And Jessica.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Jessica Vanderhoff, and I work for the WVU library system. I am an expert in market research. And today I'll be talking about different approaches and different resources that you can use to help build your pitch presentation. So I hope to work with you here and perhaps individually as you move closer to putting together your final pitch deck.
Thanks, Jessica. Okay, so we are going to start off the workshop today with Dallas talking to you about Venture Dash. I know that you guys use Venture Dash in round one, but she just wants to go over a couple of other details to get us going for round two. So Dallas, I'll kick it over to you.
Okay, guys. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about Venture Dash. I'm going to be sending you guys a link and invite to the Venture Dash website for round two. I'll share my screen so you guys can see. I'll also be sharing the link in the chat after I get done speaking. So whenever you receive the link will be exactly this for college. For high school, it'll be a little bit different with a different number. You guys are going to scroll down to join this competition. And this is the team leader that needs to do this. You guys would join as an entrepreneur. And you would do exactly how you signed up for the first round with less questions. So you'll put your phone number in here and have you completed the sign up call sheet, answer those questions and move on into entering for round two. I will be sending out the invite to the team leaders, and just like you did for round one, the team leader can invite their team members to their competition. Tara, can you put back on the slide now?
Can you stop sharing yours? Oh, there we go. All right.
So a little bit about round two, you will see it, you'll have round two, and then you'll enter into the round two semifinals. It will be open completely after this webinar here. The due date for college for your applications is January 21st by 12 p.m. And then for high school, January 14th by 12 p.m. Eastern time as well. If you guys have any trouble logging into Venture Dash and signing up for round two, you can contact me at dallas.mollett@mail.wu.edu.
Awesome. Thank you, Dallas.
Welcome.
Okay, guys. So I'm not going to read through every word on this slide. We have emailed you this information. It's up on here. But basically what you are submitting is your business model canvas, which is what Carrie is about to talk to you about. And I will be going over the scoring rubric as well. But basically you are submitting a 5-page maximum PDF. We are asking that you do not submit a Word doc. It is a PDF. To keep it fair, please just use 12-point font. You guys are permitted and encouraged to submit pictures. If you have a logo, put your logo on there. If you have a picture of your prototype, you can do that as well. The page count does not include your cover page, your table of contents, any appendices that you might have. So feel free to, if you have renderings, drawings, anything that you may have, put those in your appendices. And then we want to just make sure that that cover page includes your business name, your team members, and the date. And then again, if you have a logo, please include that. And if you don't, that's something that Carrie and Ann can help you with at the WVU Launch Lab. But I will go through and break down what you're going to be scored on whenever we go over the scoring rubric. But basically, you're just telling us what your business idea is, your customer segment, your value, and then I'll let Carrie really get into the nitty gritty on the business model canvas and what that includes. All right, Carrie, take it away.
Over to me. So,
Over to you.
yeah. So the business model canvas is pretty much the universally accepted tool for startups and innovation. So, and I know some of you are probably very familiar with the canvas, and some of you may be seeing it for the first time. We use it here in the Launch Lab for all of our students' startups. We also use it for the NSF I-Core program, which is for researchers to commercialization. So it's utilized all the way from high school through postdoc and faculty researchers. So you'll see it a lot. Yeah, thanks. And so I want to explain what it is, how it works, what each of these sections are about. And then if you have any questions at all, if you want to just unmute yourself and ask me at any time, you're welcome to, or we can save them till after my segment, totally up to you. But if you have a burning question that can't wait, please just come off mute and shout it out. So the way the canvas works, it's not necessarily intuitive. It starts in the middle. So when you have this canvas, then you can find these templates online. You can print them out. They're pretty much available anywhere. But we start in the middle with it, with the value proposition. And so with your new innovation, whatever it happens to be, you want to be really clear about the value that you're bringing to your customer. So, and you want it to be different from anything that your competition is currently offering. So how are you different? What is the value that you're bringing? And then as you move to the right, you'll talk about who's actually receiving that value. But value can take value can be anything from time saving to money saving to convenience, sustainability, whatever it is that you're bringing, make sure that you're able to very clearly articulate the value. And also, this is a good place to think about who your competition is, right? Who in the marketplace is doing what you're doing, but how are you doing it better? People generally value time and money above anything else. So if you can make a statement that you're saving people time or saving them money, that's great, but really be sure that you can back it up. So if you're going to make a claim that you're saving customers time, be really clear about how you're doing that, because chances are someone's going to challenge you on that. If you're making that claim, how can you prove that you're making that claim? So you start with the value proposition, and generally, what I recommend to people is put some bullet points in each of these blocks. Just write down a couple bullet points. You don't need 100 value propositions. 1, 2, maybe 3 is plenty. Because if you start claiming that you can do everything for everybody, it's going to look like you're making things up. So be really clear on what it is that you're bringing and how are you doing it better than your competition. And after you've got those bullet points in your value proposition column, the way that the canvas works is you move over to the right side. So the customer segments, the customer relationships, and the channels are the next section of the canvas. So you have your value propositions. If you go all the way over to the right-hand side of the canvas, you see customer segment. And so you're claiming that you provide value to somebody. To who? So if I'm saving money for somebody, who's that segment? Who is that person? And really try to define your segments in terms of people rather than institutions. So for example, if you have an educational service that you're providing, and maybe it's a higher quality education than your competitors, well, you don't want your customer segment to be schools, right? Because schools don't purchase, they're not your customers. Schools are institutions. So who in the school is going to be the purchasing? Is it an administrator? Is it a principal? Is it a teacher? Is it students? So really be as clear as you can about your customer segments. And I know Jessica will talk in detail about that. But a customer is an actual person. So we want to think about those actual people. And then the customer relationship section is really all about how are you going to reach those people? So I've established, in my example, I've established that I have a quality educational innovation that I'm going to provide to students in K through 12 schools. Okay, well, if I'm an innovator and I'm working, at a university, how am I going to actually reach those students in the schools? You can't just necessarily walk up to school children and try to sell them a product. So what is that relationship between you and those students in the schools? Do you need to talk to parents? Do you need to talk to principals? Do you need to talk to teachers? Do you need to talk to other people that are going to get you to the customer segment that you're trying to reach? So those relationships are really important to determine, the practicality of actually reaching my value and making that connection to my segment of the population. So again, customer segments, you may have 1, you may have 2, possibly 3, bullet point who those people are or those groups of people. And then in the customer relationships, bullet point a couple of ways that you're planning on actually getting to that segment, right? What kind of a relationship are you going to have with those people? And then how do you sustain that relationship? Is this something that you want your customers repeat purchasing from you? Do you want them to come back to you again and again? Is it like a subscription to something, or is it a one-time purchase? And how are you going to continue, communicating with those people? And then the channels is really the physical delivery of your product to your customer segment. So whereas the relationships are more the people part of it, the channel is how are they physically going to receive the value that you're delivering? So is it a virtual? Is it a website? Do they have to download something? Is it distribution? Do you need trucks? Do you need something, that's going to facilitate that distribution from you to your customer segment? And so you really have to put some thought into if it's a virtual thing that you're offering and there's not a physical product or a tangible product, there's no physical delivery. Maybe you have a website and maybe you take orders on your website. That's great. How are people going to communicate with you? How are they going to physically get your service from your website? And so again, bullet pointing a couple of things there on the channels that will help you, and you may already know this in your head, but it helps you get it on paper so that you could communicate it to other people. So that's the first part of the canvas. The right side of the canvas is all of the in front of the scenes, like I call it like the front of the house in a restaurant, right? That's all the front of the house. Now, the back of the house is the next section of the canvas that you want to work on, and that's your key partners, your key activities, and your key resources. So you're reaching your customers on the front of the canvas. On the back of the canvas, what do you need to do to actually create your innovation? So if you say, again, I'll go back to my example, I'm offering an exceptional educational tool for K-12 students, that's great. How am I making it, right? How am I actually doing it? Can I do all of this myself? Probably not. Most of us aren't capable of doing every single aspect of the business on our own. So you probably need to bring in some partners. You may have some really great skills in one area, but maybe you need help in another area of the business, or building the product, or building a prototype, or Tara, are you holding something up?
Am I what?
I thought I saw you holding something up. Were you taking
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
All right, I was like, what was that? But anyways, so really take inventory of what your own personal skills are and interests in bringing to the business. And then take inventory of who else you need to bring in behind the scenes to help you make your product or your service. So those are your key partners. The key activities are what actually needs to happen. If I'm building my educational tool for schools, then maybe I have 2 or 3 business partners that I bring in who have specialized skills and abilities. But then what are those activities? What are those skills and abilities that need to actually physically happen to make this product or service come alive? And so you list those key activities. Maybe it's, putting together a website, or purchasing raw materials, or, whatever it happens to be. What are those activities? And then finally, your resources, right? And so you've got to think about what do you need in the form of resources? Maybe it's people, maybe it's money, maybe it's materials, maybe it's, whatever it happens to be, those generally tangible resources that you need to have in order to make your product or service happen. So a lot of times, if you're making a tangible product, maybe it's raw materials, right? Maybe it's you just need the materials to make this product happen. Prototyping comes into play here a lot when we're talking about resources, because we might be experimenting with different types of materials to prototype or to improve upon the design of our product. So to think about those types of resources and really make a list of what those resources are.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, yes. This is the question that I wanted to ask, because I read earlier they said they want like a picture of the prototype. Are we allowed to have maybe like a 30-second video showcasing our prototype?
Tara, can they have a video?
Well, can you link a video in a PDF?
Yeah, I believe you can. It'll still take you to like a YouTube link though, but I'm pretty sure.
If you want to put that in your on the appendices, if you want to put a link to the video of your prototype, you could do that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Okay, and so the last part of our business model canvas then, of course, comes down to the money. And we need to be realistic. And that's why we save the costs and revenue until last, because it's really hard to know what it's going to cost you to make this thing and how you're actually going to make money via your revenue streams until you know all of the other components of the canvas. So because there's a cost associated with each of these blocks, right? There's a cost associated with building relationships with customers. There's a cost associated with distribution channels. There's a cost associated with paying your partners. There's a cost associated with all of the activities and resources that need to happen behind the scenes. So as you're adding up all of those costs, you want to list them in your cost structure. So what does it cost me to, set up a relationship so that I can get a customer, get in touch with a customer? what does it cost me to purchase the resources that I need to make my product or my service or my innovation? And so as you're going through kind of the top part of the canvas, make a list of the costs associated with each section, because you're going to have that cost structure where you want to list, it's going to cost me approximately, $100 to buy resources to make one prototype, or it's going to cost me $1,000 to get an attorney to do my, patent application or something like that. So there's going to be costs associated with each. Jot them down in your cost structure so you keep a running list of what that cost is going to be. Now, there's a couple ways that you can do cost structure. And when I work with clients on this, and we can do this individually too, when we schedule individual meetings, because cost structures can be a little bit tricky. If you're planning on running, I generally recommend to people who are in the startup phase, as most of you are, do the cost of one unit, right? So what does it cost you to make one unit of whatever it is you're doing? Because, and then you can figure out how many units you need to make to actually break even. So if at the end of the day, you add up all of your cost structure and it costs you $100 to make one unit of your product, whatever it is you're offering, then you need to at least charge $100 per unit under your revenue streams just to break even. And that's a really good way to think about that cost and revenue structure. So if it costs me X number of dollars to provide 1 hour of the service that I'm providing, then I need to at least charge that under my revenue so that I can break even. Now, probably most of you don't want to just break even. You probably want to make a little bit of money. So think about how what kind of a revenue stream you want to have. You may have a per unit revenue stream where you're just charging per unit. You may have supplemental revenue streams. For example, maybe you have a subscription to your service. Maybe you sell other types of supplemental goods, promotional items, whatever it is that you want that revenue stream to look like. But at the end of the day, how are you going to make money doing this? Is it going to be a monthly subscription? Is it going to be a one-off? Are you going to have items that you can add on? For example, maybe you have a product, but there are other items that you can add on to that product. So if you have a tangible product, whatever it happens to be, you might also sell promotional items, t-shirts or hats or coffee mugs, whatever it is. But that can supplement your income very well to do some promotional items like that. So you want to think about those types of revenue streams. Okay, I'm going to pause before we move to the next slide because I want to make sure that there aren't any questions that anybody has. Cost and revenue generally comes up a good bit with questions, but any part of the canvas, I'm happy to discuss in more detail. No? Okay, then I guess we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so a lot of this relates to what Jessica's going to talk about under the market research. So this is just kind of a very, very broad overview. You'll get more details of this with her. But that right side of the canvas where you have the value prop, the customer segment, the relationship, and the channels and the revenue is really all dependent on the market. So when you're doing market research, you're going to look a lot into all of those areas so that you can identify the segments. And like I mentioned before, how are you going to get to those people? How many of them are there? And so on. But that's all really kind of market driven. The things on the left side of the canvas are driven more by what you're doing as the innovator. So the partners, the activities, the resources, the cost structure is all driven by what you're doing behind the scenes. And so, but you need to be really tuned into both, right? Yes, you can control what you're doing behind the scenes to a certain extent, but you also can control your reaction to the market. So you want to think about, okay, my customer segment has changed. Maybe I have a new customer segment. Maybe I have a new relationship with my customers. Think about virtual before, before COVID, we weren't all virtual. We're all virtual now. So we don't necessarily have to make those physical trips to visit our customers. We can do it online in a lot of cases. So and think about when we have shifts like that, how do we react to it? We don't just say, oh, well, I guess I don't have a customer anymore. Oh, well, I guess, people don't want my product anymore. No, we just react to those market changes. And so you want to be tuned into both the market and your reaction to the market behind the scenes. Practical examples right now, we have supply chain problems, right? We don't all have access to the raw materials that we need to perhaps build our products or provide our service. So what are we going to do? It's good to have that contingency plan. And this is a question that judges like to ask about in competitions is, okay, if it doesn't work out exactly the way you have it on your canvas, what's your plan? You're going to fold up, or are you going to, how are you going to adjust? And so want to think about that. If you're not able to do exactly what you have on this canvas, what's your backup plan? All right. If you misidentify your customer, which you won't, because Anne's going to talk to you so well about customer identification and discovery. But if you miss a segment or you misidentify a segment, what are you going to do? You're just going to close your doors? How do you adjust to it? And so be prepared when people ask you, whether it's in this competition or outside of this competition, be prepared to respond to the question is, okay, if it doesn't go as you've planned it on this piece of paper, what are you going to do? How are you going to adjust? So you want to think about those contingency plans. Excuse me. Okay, and then we can go to my last slide. Okay. There's, again, this canvas is used, like I mentioned in the beginning, this canvas is used everywhere. It's pretty much the generally accepted innovation tool. So it's been, really analyzed in a lot of different ways. But this, I think, is also really important to point out. The value proposition, the relationships, the channels, and the segments are the outside desirability of your product. So you need all three of these, by the way. You need desirability, feasibility, and viability. But the desirability tells us there's a market out there for my product. How do I know? Because I've researched it. So I'm not going to make in my value proposition that who wants my product? Everybody. Like, that's the very worst statement that you can make, because the answer is never everybody. And it also shows that you haven't really researched very well. So you want to think about who wants my product, who desires my product. That's that whole right side, the value, the relationship, the channel, the customers. That shows that there's a need or a demand in the marketplace for what I'm offering. The behind the scenes, and I think feasibility is misspelled, I'm pretty sure. But anyways, behind the scenes, what you're doing behind the scenes is actually saying, can I do what I'm claiming that I can do? Can I really make this thing? Or is it just an idea? Can I access the resources? Can I access the materials? Do I have people that can help me with this? Or am I on my own? If I don't have people, do I have access to people? So that's the feasibility. You may have a huge market demand for your product, but you can't actually do it. You can't make it. You don't have the tools or the resources to actually make it. And so again, it doesn't work if you don't have both pieces. And then finally, it all comes down to, can you make money? And I'm not saying any of you need to become, bazillionaires from your innovation, but we all need to make enough money to keep the business going and growing. And so the viability part becomes hugely important, because it might cost you, $100 per unit to create your product, but people are not willing to pay $100 per unit to buy your product. And so if you can't at least break even, it's not going to be a very viable business. So that's going to take some research. Be real with yourselves on how much is it going to cost me to make this thing? how much is the market going to pay me for this thing? And if that doesn't match up, what are some other options? Maybe your cost structure can be reduced, right? You might be able to use different materials, cheaper materials. You may be able to hire, people who are going to charge you as much to be your partners. There's different ways that you can reduce your costs. There may be other ways that you can increase your revenue. And like I mentioned before, maybe it's not so much that you're charging more for your product, but maybe you can supplement with other types of things and, add-on subscriptions, things like that. Okay. So I have a few minutes left on my time. I'm going to just kind of stop there and open it questions or maybe comments from our other presenters that I may have forgotten, or maybe we need to emphasize more.
Carrie, I just wanted to thank you for bringing up the piece about everyone is not your customer, because how many times have we heard that in various pitch competitions? It's over and over and over. Please do not say that everyone is your customer. And another big point that you made is you need to show the judges how you're going to make money, even if you're not for a profit. You still need to pay people. You still have to pay your bills. So just saying, I'm going to apply for grants is not enough. You need to think about sustainable models and how you're actually going to make money. So I'll be quiet, and I just wanted to thank you for bringing those things up. And does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Now, Tara, those are really good points, because we do see a lot of times people say they're going to apply for grants, and that's great if you're going to apply for a grant, but grants are volatile. You never know if you're going to get it. There's no guarantee that you're going to get it. And that's another one of those contingency plan situations that if you don't get this grant, well, what's your backup plan? Where are you going to get funding? And yes, I will repeat again, if you ever want to hear a room of entrepreneurship and innovation faculty groan, say my customer is everybody. Because you will hear a collective no. So yeah, so I'll stop talking too, because we may have questions.
I have a question. I'm not sure if it will be gone over or not, but like in a business plan, one part of the financials is for the marketing and advertising and all of that. So what would you recommend for a business that's starting up that may not have any profits to put into marketing and R&D?
Tara,
I'll let Carrie take, but for this sake, for round 2, you don't need to have the financials done. In this phase of the competition, you're only in round 2. So you're just submitting your customer discovery and your business model canvas. You won't actually have to do your financials until you make it to the final round, which is in April. Yeah. But Carrie, if you wanted to speak to that point.
Yeah, and to answer that question, I would be really careful about including any type of marketing until you're actually ready for sales. Unless you're pre-selling to raise money, for prototyping, what have you. But until you have a really finished sellable product, I wouldn't worry too much about marketing and advertising. Now, if you want to include in your business plan, once I have a completed, manufactured small batch ready to go out the door, and I need to market it and advertise it, then sure, you can put your budget in for that. But I think a lot of times people put marketing and advertising in really too soon before they even have a product to sell. And so you want to be realistic. And when judges ask you that question, or anybody asks you that question, you can say, yeah, I'm planning on budgeting for that, but I'm really working on my prototype or my small batch manufacture first to make sure that I have something to sell.
And can I just add one more thing for Allison's question? So I agree with everything that Dr. White said. But the other things that you can do like early on are, especially with, nowadays with social media, if you do, just for you to have that knowledge, if you just do like a quick search for, cost of advertising on Facebook, or whatever kind of social media platform that perhaps you think your customer segment is more attracted to, or hypothetically, if you were going to do something with like a local newspaper or a local radio station, just kind of thinking about the channel through which you're going to reach your customer. You know, that oftentimes is you can just do a quick search and kind of get an estimate to say, okay, the local, radio station or the local newspaper, costs X dollars per advertisement. And then that'll just give you a ballpark sense to then let you know, like, if you plan to do so many targeted advertisements over the course of X number of months, right, you can have that awareness. So that's just my 2 cents on that. Just a quick way to do it so that you have an understanding before you get to the finals in April.
Thank you.
All
Any
right,
other
well,
questions?
I think everybody has my contact information. So if you, after this, if you think of something else, just feel free to reach out to me directly.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Tara.
All right, Ann Jones, you're up.
All right. Hey, thank you very much, Carrie. And Allison, I'm also going to be addressing a little bit about that question as well. So, but I'm so glad that Carrie went, Dr. White went first, and talking about the business model canvas. One of the things I really like about the business model canvas is it's a live document. It's not like I'm going to fill out the business model canvas and then whatever I learn, I'm never going to change it. That's what it is. I'm stuck with it. It's a live document. And a lot of it is you'll begin by putting down like ideas. This is what I think my biggest value proposition is. This is what I think my customer segments are. But then you've got to go and begin to do some research and to confirm where you're right, or to say, well, I'm not right. I got to make a change. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that part, the customer discovery. And, when we look at customer discovery, when we do a lot of research, we look at primary and secondary research. And I'm going to focus on primary research first, getting out of the building. You can go to the next slide. Yay. Okay, so this is, for me, I think this is one of the most fun parts about looking at your business and doing discovery. It's also kind of one of the scary parts, right? This is the part when you guys are going to get out of the building. This is when you're going to go out and actually talk to people. So you guys have all your big ideas, and now you're going to go and talk to people to see whether you're right, whether you're wrong. And when we do customer discovery, we often look into two sort of ways. One is that problem phase, right? So to test whether the problem you think your target customer has are real, painful, and valuable enough to have a solution, right? And that's sort of where you are. You're sort of saying, I think, that my customers really, they really have a problem with having good pockets in their raincoats, right? And this is a problem that's real and painful enough where they want to make a change, right? The second sort of phase of customer discovery is the solution phase, right? After you've come up and you've done all your research, then you go out and you can test your product and sort of say, okay, I know what their problem is the solution I'm giving them what they want. Can you go to the next slide, please? All right, I'm just roaring through these slides. So for us, we're going to focus on that first part. Actually, that first part, which is what is the problem? So when Dr. White went through that business model canvas, when she goes through the value propositions and she goes through those customer segments, you guys are sort of saying, I think this is the problem that I'm solving, right? So now you've got to go out and talk to people to not just sort of prove that whatever the problems that Marshawn thinks are out there, that they're really people who think, yep, Marshawn's absolutely right. The problem that he thinks out there that he's solving, that's the one it is. He's actually got to go out there and try to sort of prove that his idea is wrong, right? And that's where it gets kind of tricky, because it's two things. It's one, it's going out, talking to people about, you know, their problems, and it's trying to get at the problem without giving your solution away, right? Because it's not that easy, really. Like I don't know Marshawn, but I'm looking at him and he's nodding while I'm talking. So he must be an awesome human being. So whatever Marshawn is selling, I'm buying, right? So, you know, if Marshawn just comes out and says, hey, I've got this great idea, what do you think? I'll be like, yeah, you're awesome, I'll want it, right? Here's what getting out and doing customer discovery is really tough, because you need to find out whether I really want what you have, or I just think you're a cool person and I'm sort of, you know, saying whatever you want to hear. So that's where we go and we do customer discovery. We get out there and we talk to people about their problems, their needs, without selling without selling our idea. And so what you're trying to do there is you're going to start, and I usually start with like, let's start with like, you know, I think you have to do a minimum, am I right, Tara, 10 customer interviews, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Which, you know, once you get going, getting the first two can be tough. And then once you get going, you really get the ball rolling. But the first thing I try to do is sort of think like, who could I talk to? Who do I think my customer is? And how Carrie had said, you know, your customer is not a bank. It might be somebody who works in a bank. It's not a school. It might be, you know, a teacher or an administrator. You got to find out who are those people. And then how do I get to know them, right? So you'll all get to know each other and you're going to begin networking. And a lot of it is setting up those initial meetings, right? Instead of Bobby Noble sort of saying, I've got this, you know, I've got a product that I really want to sell, and will you talk to set it up more openly to sort of say, hey, I'm doing research for a project, right? It makes it a little bit more open for you to actually talk to people, right? So we set up these initial meetings, right? And then I begin to figure out, like, what are the questions I'm going to ask? Now, the thing is, when we're doing this, we're really trying to get a lot of qualitative data, not quantitative data, right? We're not trying to make this statistically valid. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get people who could be your customer to tell you a story, right? We're trying to get them to tell you what you know, to confirm what you think you know, and also to tell you what you might not know. The one thing you're not trying to do is you are absolutely not trying to sell your product, right? Your product, your idea does not come into play when you're doing these problems, when you're doing these questions. And again, that's a challenge, right? So Avalon goes out and she's starting to talk to people, and people are like, well, just show me your idea. I just want to see your idea. And you're like, no, I want to talk to you. I want to know about your story. It's not as easy as it looks. And the more you talk, the better it will be. So I like to talk, you know, and get people to tell me a story, tell me about a time when, and really get those open-ended questions. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so how am I going to do this? First of all, I would try to do face-to-face interviews if you can. You can do video conferences as well, and phone calls are also fine. Although college students don't seem to be really big fans of phone calls. But people like me are. But a face-to-face interview is the best. Why? Because part of your getting feedback as you're talking to people is getting those nonverbal cues, right? When you're talking about, tell me about a time when you had to set up your garden and you were trying to do your irrigation. Tell me about a time when you were, when it was raining and you didn't have an umbrella. When you're beginning to get those stories, you can pick up so much on this sort of people shaking their head, people rolling their eyes. So that interview, that person to person, can be really helpful. Things that aren't a good way to get customer, do customer discovery, are surveys or sending out emails. That is far more of a static way of getting information, and you're really not going to get.
They're just getting on those.
So those are the kind of interview types. Let's go to the next slide.
I got a question.
Yeah.
How come surveys are a bad method?
Cool. Good question. So here's why with customer discovery, I say stay away from surveys. When you're doing a survey, you're setting up like far more narrow definition, right? And you know what you know, right? I think that, customers are going to want this. And this is what I know. And I want to know, do they want red or do they want black? I think I know what they want. What you miss out on a survey is the things you don't know. So when you're doing a person-to-person interview, right? And you're sort of saying, I believe that people will change from a big backpack brand to my brand if it had a solar charger in it. And I'm beginning to have these conversations. If I do a survey about solar chargers and backpacks, I'm really narrowing down my answers, and I'm missing the chance to open up to realize that, well, actually, the problem is not the backpack or the solar charger. The problem is really, I worry about it getting stolen, from the library or something. So doing those like person-to-person interviews, you open yourself up to the answers you were not looking for. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But I know there are some they're not hard, they're not complex, but like more surveys that like kind of talk about different, say the backpack thing, say you would say the solar backpacks and then all these other backpacks, and talking about the aspects of all of them and asking questions and more looking more towards preference in these surveys. Couldn't you do it that way?
I think it is a valuable, doing surveys, doing focus groups are really good once you want to get some more granularity of different ideas. But when you're trying to discover, because I would really think like at the beginning, the focus is on discovery. So if you're trying to discover things you don't know, I would always begin with the person-to-person interview. Okay. So that's good question, good ideas.
I have a question too. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, this is practically following the customer discovery model, and basically, what we need to do with this is we need to ask not a series of questions, because that's kind of relating to a survey, but we need to have this conversation to where our potential customers won't have a sort of bias towards the answer that we want. So it's practically like we need to consider the bad the same way we'll consider the good.
Exactly.
With a product.
Exactly.
Okay.
And here's the thing. I mean, and it's kind of tough. Have you ever heard the phrase, nobody likes to hear their baby's ugly?
Exactly. Yes.
So you've got this awesome idea, right? And it takes a lot of guts, because you're going to be talking and be like, well, oftentimes I often begin with sort of that, tell me a story, right? Mm-hmm. Walk me through the last time you had to buy shoes, walk me through the last time you had to rent the car. I get that open thing. And I use a lot of whys. Well, why did you do that? Why did you do that? Why did you? I keep on pushing them down. But the challenge is that if you're doing this right, you may learn that what you think is a great idea, right? Everybody wants these shoes that are waterproof. And then you find out people will say, well, the one thing I hate is waterproof shoes. And you're like, okay, that's now I learned that, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of it is to actually prove your idea wrong, right? You're
Mhm.
still falling in love with your problem, but you're trying to prove your idea wrong. And here's something that I do, and I try to write down before I go out. I've begun to do research on who I think my customer segment's going to be. I begin to make my list of who they're going to be. And I
Mhm.
also begin to make my list of what I want to find out, right? I make a hypothesis, even if I don't know. Like, I just make it up. I think 20% of the people, 20% of the people would rather have a raincoat that had really good heavy duty pockets, right?
Right.
And willing to change brands. I put a stake in the ground. That's what I think it is. And then I begin to ask the questions. Tell me about what you wear when it's raining. Tell me about like where you carry things. So I begin to figure this out. One of the things I also do, so I figured out a lot of like early leading questions, but I also let the conversation take me where it's going to go, right? It's just fine if you start off with one kind of question, you're like, and you realize that the conversation has kind of drifted, because then you're beginning to understand this is what this customer segment is really interested in. So you may find from this, I don't have the solution I thought I wanted, or I may not have the customer that's the match that I wanted. So some of you guys are by yourselves, and some of you folks are in teams. A couple of things that I really like to do when I'm doing these interviews, I'll bring a pad of paper. If I can do it with a team, I'll ask the question and I'll have my teammate take the notes. And here's why. When I begin, I want to be in the moment, right? So I begin talking, we sort of ask questions, tell me about a time when, hey, Bobby, tell me a little bit more about that idea. Can you just walk me through that? Why is this, why do you find that a problem? Why is this why? While I'm asking Bobby all these questions, Sydney is taking notes down verbatim, right? She's just taking like, this is exactly what Bobby said. That gives me a chance to go back after the meeting to find out what did we hear and what did we learn. So when you can do it with more than with another person, it's good. So one person could be the question person and the other person could be taking down the notes. So, we want to learn as much as possible. We want to learn about what things are going to cast doubt on your assumptions, right? I've made an assumption that this is what people want, right? Am I right? Write down verbatim as much as you can. And then you can go over and sort of say, this is what they said, and this is what I learned. Let's go to the next slide.
I do have one more question.
Yeah.
So can you, instead of having someone to write, with the individual's permission, couldn't we use our voice recording app?
Yeah, and I think that like all the best questions, the answer is it depends, right?
Uh-huh.
So you might be meeting with some people and sort of say, hey, I'm doing this research on this idea I'm working on. Would you mind if I recorded our conversation, right?
Right.
You might be talking to people and they're like, yeah, this person is not going to like that. And they're going to be uncomfortable. So it depends. Some people are very cool with that and they can find it really helpful.
Now the last question, you might cover it in a couple of slides ahead or something, but my part is, how am I going to get the individual to do the interview? Do I just ask them if they want to do an interview, or like, how would I approach that situation?
Excellent question. I'll answer that right now. So here's how, and I think this is my last slide. And so here's how we can best go about it. The first thing I do, is I figure out what do I believe my customer segment's going to be, right? Are they college kids? Are they administrators at a university? Are they horseback riders? Are they poodle owners? And once I do that, then I begin to figure out, how am I going to find these people? And honestly, often at first it can take a while to sort of figure out, like, do I know anybody? And I'll start with one or two people, and it only takes one or two people that I know that might fit in. I often begin with this kind of, intro. I'll usually send an email and then follow up with a phone call to say, hi, my name is Ann Jones. I'm doing a research project. And I often couch it as research because research sounds, I am researching a new project and I'm not trying to sell them anything. Right. So I don't want to sort of get people to sort of feel like they're beholden to selling. And I don't want to make them feel like they have to support everything I'm doing. So when I say, well, I'm doing research on this idea, would you have 15, 30 minutes to talk to me about my idea? Right. So it's very open. I'm not leading them to what I want to say, keeping it super open. Right. And let's say it's Jessica Vanderhoff who I'm asking. And Jessica knows I'm doing this research. I've already set up, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes of her time. So she knows I'm not going to waste all of her time, and we can either do it in person. I can go to her office, or we can set up a meeting on Zoom if that works better for her. So once I do that, and sometimes I'm like, I just need one or two people to talk to. And you can, if you need to get some ideas of making contacts, Dr. White and Tara and Dallas, and I can all be helpful there. This is how I do it. So let's say it would be Jessica. I begin by just introducing myself. This is who I am. If I'm doing it together with a team, sort of, hi, this is our idea. Not this is our idea. This is who we are. I'm here from Marshall University, and we're doing a project, and it has to do with the weather, right? Keeping it very open. And we begin to sort of build up, usually build up sort of some relationship, right? So we begin to talk about, I just want to ask you some questions about weather, right? And we begin to keep it really open. Okay, we're talking about weather. This is what it is. Can you walk me through a time when you knew, we're going to have bad weather? How do you, when you know you're going to have bad weather, how do you usually prepare, right? Well, it's really rainy where I am, and you listen to them, like sort of begin that story. As I get someone like Jessica talking, then I can begin to sort of lead her in one direction or the other. Not leading her towards my idea, but getting more information. So Jessica, you said you usually, keep rain gear in the trunk of your car. You tell me more about that. And she tells me more. Well, can you tell me, so do you have something? Do you always do that? Why do you do that? So I begin to sort of like get little questions there. And I usually have, I've set up 2 or 3 open-ended questions about that. I might also begin to ask some more specific questions, like when you're choosing, I don't know, because I'm obsessed with raincoats today. When you're buying rain gear, where do you look, right? And actually that might help me understand, like Allison was asking the question about, like, Facebook advertising. If Jessica says, well, usually, I don't trust anything on the internet, I only go into a store. Right. I'm like, okay, the kind of person who does this, or, how does she shop? How does she figure things out? So I begin to start with these open-ended questions. I ask a lot of whys, and I ask a few specific questions. And I've begun to either tell them I'm going to be taking notes on this, or ask, if I can record. Now, as it winds up, I'm going to thank Jessica, and let her know. I'll keep her in the loop. And I'm going to also ask her, because I don't know many, people to interview immediately. I might say, Jessica, do you know any other librarians that I could speak to? Right. And because she and I have had such a good rapport, I can get a couple of names for her. Now, Jessica has no idea. She doesn't know what my product is. We've been very open. sort of had open-ended questions. We've had a nice conversation, but I haven't tried to sell her anything. And she hasn't felt like sort of put upon like, oh, I have to be supportive of something. It's been just a nice, positive conversation, and she's been able to share her thoughts. And then hopefully Jessica will be able to introduce me to somebody else. Now it is important at the end, especially because I just got introduced to Jessica myself. When I finish up, I send a thank you note, because that sort of builds up my sort of reputation. So if I ever want to follow up with her again, I've got that. So that's sort of the pattern that I go on. Once you get going, especially if Jessica is going to refer me to Bobby Noble, after I contact Bobby, I'm going to let Jessica know, hey, thank you for introducing me to Bobby. It was great to talk to him, right? And that's how we go on and on. So you really only have to know one or two people to get going, to really go out and get 10 interviews. We can start with people who already know our idea, but the best customer interviews are the ones that don't know your idea already. So do we have any more questions on this?
I was just going to follow up to Anne's recommendations, which were all just spot on. But I think the two things to take away is always let the interviewee know the time frame, right? Because I might be willing to give like 15-20 minutes, right? I might not be willing to give an hour. So if someone approaches me and just says like, oh, I just want to chat for 15-20 minutes, right? I know the scope of the time, right? So I think that's really important. And then the other thing that you guys can use to your advantage is that your students, right? And so I think a lot of folks are much more open to talking to students and to helping students, whether you be at the high school or the collegiate level, rather than talking to like actual salespeople, right? A salesperson calls me a vendor, for the library, and it's the last person who I want to talk to. But if anyone, a community member or a student, is wanting to talk to me about something that I have an interest in, then I'm very willing, right? So I think to use those two things to your advantage, right, is identifying a period of time and trying to stick to that unless they choose to go over, right? And then also just explaining that you're working on a project, you're a student at Marshall, you're a student at, University High, what have you. Because I think those two things open more doors than not.
Hey, thank you, Jessica. And one more final thought on that. This is a competition, but remember, this is competitive, but it's not combative, right? We see a lot of people being hugely successful coming out of the business plan competition. And you guys can work together in that, you can say, hey, can anybody introduce me to somebody who is a dog owner in the southern part of the state, right? So, Allison, you can sort of say, hey, can I make a connection with Marshawn? Marshawn's interested in talking to dog owners in the southern part of the state, right? So you guys, again, you're competitive. We're all pretty competitive here, but this is not combative. And so feel free to sort of, if you have a good contact, if you have a good question, if you want to bounce, can I try out some of my questions with each other? Those are things that I think make this a positive, really, really good competition. So thank you. If there are no questions, I'll hand it over.
Well, Anne, thank you so much. I think that was really impactful. And I just want to reiterate the point that you and Jess both made, hammering in that you are a student and not a salesperson, that they're going to be more likely to open up to you, and putting those guardrails on that. I'm not going to take up an hour of your time. I just need 10 or 15 minutes. But yeah, thank you guys so much. And then Anne, I don't know if you or Carrie want to mention the services that you provide for free through the WVU Launch Lab and how you have graciously offered every single student in the high school and collegiate business planning competition. So anyone that is listening to this right now, you are available to use those services. So I'll turn it over to Anne to kind of speak to that.
Cool. I'll talk to it and then I'll hand it over to you, Carrie, if that works. But yeah, Carrie and I, Dr. White and I both do business coaching. And we work with, during the year, all year, we work with WVU students. But for this business plan competition, we're here for all of you guys. So some of the things we can really help you do, we can help you practice your pitch. We can help you brainstorm like different ideas. We can talk to you about your prototype. We can give you feedback on different things you can take. We can, help you work through some of these things from the business model canvas to the finance. So absolutely, I can, and I'll speak for myself. I have usually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I do client coaching. So I can meet with any of you, even if you're not here physically, we can do a one-on-one meeting on video. And then I also do, in the spring semester, I do mini meetings. So we'll be doing some mini meetings. Those are Tuesday nights from 5 to 6. And you guys can jump on some of those. And we do things from learning how to pitch your idea, learning how to like do brainstorming on creative ideas. It's a fun way to get out there and fail with no consequences, right? So we usually have these meetings, weekly meetings with like 5 or 10 people, and it's a good way, because to get out there and be goofy, and to meet some other people, and like I said, fail without consequences. Carrie, what do you want to add there?
Sign me up, please. I'll take any type of bonus help. I mean, it's free anyway, so why not? I think we all should take advantage of it. But hey, I'm gonna speak for myself here, so I'm down for it. I'm definitely down for it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Anne pretty much covered everything from our end here at the Launch Lab. We're available to everybody for, any aspect, really from ideation through commercialization is what we do. But another thing we can help with, because I know everyone's located all over the state, Tara has been instrumental in setting up this entrepreneurial ecosystem that we have across the state of West Virginia. And y'all might not be aware of it. But it is in West Virginia Executive Magazine currently, so you can always pick up a copy of it. It's fantastic. But if we can connect you with someone close to you in your region or your community, we also can do that because we have this wonderful network of resources across the state. So that's something else. If you're not familiar with someone who may be closer to you geographically, we can probably find someone for you.
Yes,
Hey,
thank you,
I
Carrie.
add one more quick thing. I have to jump off in a minute because I have a standing Wednesday call, but my contact is out there, and I am thrilled to meet with any and all of you. Yay! Tara and Carrie know that I'm incredibly competitive, so whoever I work with, we will be working to make you be as successful as you can be and have as much fun as you can. So thanks.
Well, before you go, I just want to ask, where can I find your contact information at? Like once this, the Zoom meeting is over with, because I would like to contact you as soon as this meeting is over with. She already leave? I think she already left. Oh no, she's there.
No, Anne, you're muted.
Now.
Yep.
Good.
You're good now.
You're back.
Yep, you're good.
Contact details will go in the chat.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
We'll put it in the chat, and then we'll send out, once the recording comes out, we will also send everyone's contact information through that as well. Carrie, thank you for showing West Virginia Executive Magazine. So if you guys have not gotten your copy of West Virginia Executive, there are tons of articles and the great little handy map right there. And you can access that online if you go to West Virginia Executive. And that just shows all of the resources available across the state. As you move farther and farther into the competition, the more, yes, perfect. Thank you, Carrie. The more resources that are available to you, For example, our CBI for the finalists, you will get $1,000 worth of services from them. Everyone here at the W Launch Lab is helping you for free right now. So I do want to point out that the resources that you're getting right now, the consulting work that you're getting, in the real world, they're hundreds of dollars an hour to have consulting, to sit with a lawyer, to sit with someone to do prototyping. So please take advantage of all of these resources right now. Even if you are not a WVU student, all of these resources are available to you. And that is, I think, a good segue to pass it over to Jess to talk about the research and the resources that are available to you to do that research.
Folks. So I have a tough show to follow with Carrie and Anne. But basically, if you could, Tara, go to the next slide for me. Thank you. Okay, so what I want to do is just spend a little bit of time talking about tools for research. So the first thing that I want to just kind of preface this conversation with is that information is not free. So just like Tara said that, you know, consulting services are upwards of a few $100s per hour. Market research reports, information about customer segments, a lot of money goes into that industry, right? Building that data, doing that type of research. And so just like Anne and Carrie are available for consultations, I'm also available for consultations, and I'll share my contact information in a few minutes. And I say that because the different schools and colleges you're at will have access to different levels of resources. So at WVU, because we are a very large institution with a little bit bigger of a budget than some of the other colleges and high schools throughout the state, we subscribe to and we purchase hundreds of thousands of dollars of market research that people at other colleges might, or high schools in particular, will not have access to. And so while I can't open up access to those resources for you, if you meet with me, right, one-on-one, what we can do is I can share that information with you individually. And so I just wanted to kind of start the conversation there. Today, I'm going to be showing what I call open access or freely available information. So information that you guys would be able to locate on the free web. And that's a really good starting point, and it's a really good place to be for this part of the competition. But just know that, you know, hypothetically, if anyone went to Google right now and did market research report and pet supplies, right, you would probably get a few dozen different reports, and they would be like, oh, this report costs $500, this report costs $200, right? You are not to buy anything, right? We do not want you buying that information, because more than likely, you know, we have access to a good report. Marshall has access to a good report. So just be aware that if you don't want to reach out to me for a consultation or via email with a couple of different requests, definitely hit up your local public or academic library, because you would be amazed by the type of information that they are purchasing on your behalf as a student at that organization. So that's just a little bit of a heads up. So with that said, I am going to be showing freely accessible things. Some of the content that I'm going to show today is kind of what I say, like half-half, right? They make it about 50% freely available, and then there's like a subscription piece. So I'm going to be showing you how to kind of best leverage the freely accessible content on some of these websites. So Tara, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So if you could stop share with you, thank you. And let me just switch on over. Okay, so if Marshawn, can you give me a thumbs up to say that you can see my screen? Thank you, sir. So this is a page that I put together as just kind of like a one-stop shop. And I have some notations here. So again, if you're a WV user, you should be referencing this other page, and then just information about kind of your local public library, your local college library. And so I'm going to share this link in the chat. And this link has my contact information as well, and a way to get in touch with me over the winter before the January deadlines. And so on this page, what I really want to focus on today are two different resources, or two different tabs rather. I want to first start, because we've been having this conversation about, discovering your customer segment. I want to kind of continue on with that conversation. So Anne, right, talked a lot about what we would call as primary research. And that is you talking to, potential customers one-on-one. It's primary because you are the one who is collecting the information, right? What I want to talk about that kind of complements what Anne was saying is secondary research. So this is information that someone else has collected, right, for another purpose, not specific to your research question or not specific to your, your problem. And how you can take that information that has been previously collected, right, and try to apply it to better help solve, right, whatever it is you're proposing to your customer. And so again, on this particular, what we call research guide, right, I'm looking at the demographics and consumer behavior tab. This little presentation is also summarized here. So if you want to kind of revisit that, that's linked for kind of future reference. So the first one that I think is really valuable, that I just want to spend a few minutes showing you kind of what it does, is this .com website down here. It's called claritas.com. So Claritas is a multi-million-dollar research firm that, among other things, collects information about you. So across the US, right, they go out and they collect information about how people spend their money, about what brands and products people buy, and then they look at different demographics. So what they talk about is essentially they look at different clusters of people, right, across the United States, and they categorize people by their place of residency, right? So they look at people, are they living in a rural area, a suburban area, an urban area, right? So that's the first thing they look at. The second thing they look at is what they call is presence of family life. So that is, are you young, a bachelor, don't have kids yet, right? Are you kind of family life, middle-aged, have a family, or are you maybe a little bit older and you're an empty nester? So as you're thinking about your customer segment and you're thinking, okay, well, how do I describe this person, right? This is sometimes a good starting place, because this will kind of give you a very broad description of who your segment could be. You're going to use this, right, only as a starting point, because then what you're going to do is gaining the knowledge that you're going to see through here in a few minutes. You're going to take this information, you're going to combine it with the interviews that you do, right? You're going to combine those, both of that information, right? And that's what's going to give you kind of that description of your customer segment. And so with this, like I said before, Claritas is a huge multi-million-dollar research firm, and they do not give all of their information away for free, right? Information is not free. But what they do is they give you a little taste of the information that they provide, and then they say, oh, and for a cost, right, you can get all of these other details. We're not going to worry about the subscription piece or the paid for piece, because I think all you guys need right now is that first piece, right? That big profile of who your potential customer segment could be, right? Because as Tara and Carrie said earlier on, your customer segment is not everybody. You are not Google and you are not Amazon. Hopefully, fingers crossed, 5 years from now, you can be Google or you can be Amazon. But guess what? Right now, you're not, right? So you are going to start with a very defined customer segment. So let me show you how this works. So there's a couple of different ways that we can approach this. If you want to start with your zip code, you can start with your zip code or a combination of zip codes, right? So if you're in, say, the Morgantown to Clarksburg area, you can do a bunch of different zip codes and kind of see, okay, well, what are the patterns, up and down the 79 corridor? Are they the same types of people, or do we see kind of a variation between Morgantown and Clarksburg? The other way you can do it is starting with what I'm going to call the profile or the segment. So let's start there. And again, I'm not going to do a deep dive into this. I'm going to let you guys explore this on your own. So you can see here are all of the different segments. So this particular company, Claritas, breaks the US into 68 distinct segments. Like I said before, based on geography, based on presence of family life, and then based on income. So what you guys want to start to think about, just at the very high level, right, is, okay, well, thinking about your product or your service, thinking about the price point, right? Thinking about, okay, is this something that appeals to people who are younger, middle age, maybe older, like your parents' age, like empty nesters? Does this appeal? Does this have like a geographic appeal? Is it more appropriate for a rural community? Is it more appropriate for somebody who lives in an urban center, right? Because the person who lives in an urban center, right, is very different than somebody who lives and their needs are very different than someone who lives in a rural community. And so with that said, here are the different buckets or segments that this company has created. And this is kind of an industry standard. So if you're thinking about going into marketing, this is one of kind of the industry standards of how you would categorize, right, people. And so we have Beltway boomers, urban elders, the Mayberryville. So let's see, upper crust. So if we just click on one of the descriptions, give it a second. Here is just a very quick description, and I can blow this up a little bit for you, right? So we have this segment. They are wealthy, right? So they're high income performing, mainly without children. So again, thinking to yourself about your product or your service, okay, is the presence of children a factor? It may or may not be, right? But usually the presence of disposable income, right, is a factor, especially when you're thinking about certain price points. So we have empty nester couples who are a little bit older, right? They have high earnings. They are very educated, right? They have postgraduate degrees. And then if you come down a little bit, you can see, right, they're likely to live in suburban communities. Household technology, so that means they're likely to adopt technology quickly versus somebody who might be a little bit more resistant or just doesn't have the desire to adopt technology, right? Home ownership, are they renters or are they owners? So thinking about if your product, is it for somebody who would rent an apartment, or is it more for somebody who would own, a $600,000 house in the suburbs? And then if you come down, you can see the different types of purchasing, right? The different types of products, brands they buy. So again, these are just, it's a very quick snapshot. It's not a lot of details, but you can see owns a Lexus, right? The type of fast food that they eat, it's not McDonald's, it's going to be California Pizza Kitchen. When they travel, right, they're not going to the New River Gorge, they're going to Europe, right, on probably some fancy, river cruise, and watches news, right? So again, thinking about the channels, right, thinking about your customer channels, how do you reach them, right? Well, if you know that this person is a high tech adopter, right? And you know that this person listens to a lot of news, that might tell you, right, that perhaps you would reach them, you know, through some type of mobile technology, mobile news app, right, would be an appropriate way to reach out to these folks. So you can kind of come and see. And so I just want to repeat that this is not, this upper crust is not your customer segment. It's the starting point for you to start to better describe your customer segment, right? So you start here and then you say, okay, well, how can I fine tune this, right? How can I make this more specific and tailored to my specific service? So perhaps going back to Anne, she was talking, I think, about pet ownership, right? And it's like, oh, well, upper crust, you know, they probably have a pet, they probably have a dog. That dog probably has some like bougie sweater, right? Or that dog probably has some kind of fancy crate or needs some fancy dog trainer, right? So thinking about how you take this segment based on Claritas's description, and then how do you then further tailor that based on everything that you discovered from your interviews. So hopefully that makes sense. So again, there's a lot of them, but there's different ways you can kind of sort through them. So this is by life stage. So this is kind of young to old, or you can do it by social group. And that'll kind of bring back down. The social group is income performing, right? So very wealthy, right, to lower income performing assets, right? So perhaps they don't have as much disposable income. Perhaps your product is at a lower price point than, you know, again, that like crazy European river cruise. So a really good starting point, right? It'll kind of get you thinking through, who should you be contacting, right? What type of person, and then ask yourself, does geography, does presence of children or age, right? Does age or presence of children make a difference, right? I'm going to be more likely to buy something than my parents, right? My parents are going to be more likely to buy something than I am. You guys who are much younger than me, right, are going to have totally different purchasing preferences, right, than somebody who's 40 years old, right? So those are all kind of things to think about as you're putting together the profile. Any questions for me on the segments or how to use the segments or kind of anything that I've discussed so far? Hearing nothing, I'm going to jump back to the page. And the other one that I want to spend a few minutes showing everyone is this resource by the US Census, so the US government. The census put together this really neat tool that's called the Census Business Builder, the Small Business Edition. They also have the regional analyst. Both of them are great. I'm just going to show one for purposes of today. So this is kind of like a search engine, like a fancy search engine. And you can come in here and there's two different ways you can search. So you can either kind of start with the big category. So depending on what your product or service is, does it fall into food services? Does it fall into personal services? Does it fall into retail? So retail would be like apparel, sneakers, rain jackets, bougie dog sweaters, right? That's all of your retail stuff. Personal service is more like getting your hair cut, getting your hair dyed, right? It would be more along the lines of like medical kind of, or no, medical service is going to be over here. I can click into personal service, auto repair, landscaping, again, home ownership, right? And if I go back one, clear selections, some of you might be working in more of the professional services. So like an accounting service, a legal service, architectural type of stuff. So let me kind of preface this conversation with, it's more than likely because you guys are coming up with kind of a brand new, right, kind of service or technology or product that you're probably going to sit in between two different ones, right? Like if we think about perhaps like Uber, right? Like Uber would fall, car services would fall in between personal services, right? Because it's kind of like your own chauffeur, but then it's also like a form of retail. So understand that you're probably going to be working with more than one report. Just because I assume that most of you, right, it's not going to be a perfect one-for-one fit, but you're going to want to look at, multiple reports that apply to the product or service that you're offering. So if I come into here and I do something like fitness, again, I could start up here and just kind of scan through, or you can use, you start with your own free natural language, right? You type in a keyword and you start to see what pops up. So let's say that my new service is kind of this like virtual fitness, right? So I'm going to come and I'm going to look at maybe the personal trainer, but I'm also going to look at fitness clubs. So like I said, it's not going to be just one report, one and done. You're going to look at multiple ones. So now I start my search with the sport club facilities. And again, we're going to start, by defining like kind of the scope. So you're not catering to everybody, right? You might be catering to more people down the road, but you want to think about, okay, well, where does this person live? Do they live in Pittsburgh? Do they live in Morgantown? Or do they live in like Mingo County, right? Because all of those places are, like I said, very different people with very different types of services and products already available. So I'm going to start with Pittsburgh. And you can see I can start to type in Pittsburgh. And I can either choose to do the metro area or I can do the city. So the difference between these two is the city is literally much more narrow. It's just the city limits of Pittsburgh. The metro area is, probably close to 50 miles north of Pittsburgh, 50 miles south of Pittsburgh, probably all the way out to Wheeling, West Virginia, right? So the metro area is going to be a much more ambiguous, a much broader, right, geographic area. I'm going to start with the city because I'm thinking that with my fitness app, right, with my gym, brick and mortar building, whatever it is I'm doing, I want to target Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania residents. So I'm going to go to the map. And the map's just going to give me some basic quantitative, right? So Anne was talking a lot about qualitative information, right? Knowing about people, right? Kind of more exploratory. This is going to give us like actual quantitative numbers, like how many people live in the city, what type of education do they have? Are they likely to own a home? What is their disposable income, right? What is the median household income? So thinking about all of these things when you establish your profile. What I want to really do is come down here and I can play with all of these filters, and I encourage you guys to all do that. But if I just hit create report, and we'll give this a second to load, you can get a sense. So again, remember that I searched for fitness clubs, right? Because that is kind of along the lines of where my product and service is going. So I want to understand what the current market is in Pittsburgh, right? What does the current market for fitness clubs currently look like in Pittsburgh, right? Because I bet the judges are going to ask you, what's your competition, right? Who are you going up against? What are their price points? Because if your price point, right, is too far off from their price point, right, what then is the advantage of Jessica, the consumer, going to your gym rather than their gym? So these are all things to think about. But you can come down here, you have the population, right? You can think about, okay, age, right? So if I'm at a gym, am I going to be offering services to young children? So like families with like young kids. So, do I have enough of the population to be serving, right? Doing like a teen event or a teen program or a children's event? Or do I really want to be focusing on kind of like that middle age, person? We go down, so these are all the demographics, right? The demographics of Pittsburgh. We go further down, we have the income, right? Thinking about your price point. And if we continue to kind of scroll through all of this information, there's lots of information. So you can see the number of establishments. So hypothetically, this could be some of your competition, and you might want to look into some of these businesses to see, okay, well, what are they offering? What are their price points? Who are they targeting? Like, what do their Facebook pages say? Are they going after college kids, or are they going after middle-age, right? Middle-age working women, right? Again, a gym for a 40-something-year-old, right, is probably not the gym that you guys would go to. And if we continue to go further down, there's lots of different graphs and charts. But the one that I really wanted to point out is this one down here at the bottom of the page, which talks about customer spending, right? So how much money do Pittsburghers, right, spend on alcoholic beverages? How much do they spend on apparel? How much do they spend on dining out, right? Again, thinking about your product or your service. And you can come down and you can see pet services, so on and so forth. So I'm sure that there is a data point that talks about customer spending in your general area, right? So again, am I a homeowner and I have to pay for, someone to mow my grass, personal care, right? And you can go down and you can kind of take a look at all of these different types of expenditures. Because again, when you're thinking about your segment and thinking about what your price point is, right? Or if you have to manufacture a product, right? And the cost to manufacture the product is perhaps too high, right? That the actual retail value might not be, there might not be enough demand for it, right? If the manufacturing cost is just too high, right? And it's beyond, right, the price point that Jessica would pay for it. So lots of information. So what I'm recommending is that, you take this secondary research, the research from Claritas and the research from the Census Small Business Builder, right? And you use that to complement your the primary research that you gain through the interviews. And that's how you're going to establish kind of that profile of the ideal customer. And it's also going to help you down the road when you get in front of the judges and the judges say, well, how many people in Pittsburgh would be interested, right, in buying that? Well, now you have some demographic breakdown of, well, hey, there are X number of people who own a home who are between the ages of 25 and 64. Pet ownership is at, 55%. Therefore, right, it's safe to assume that this number of people could potentially be my, potential buyer. So that was a lot of information, and that was only 2 of the websites that I have available to you on this particular guide. The other ones that I'm not going to show, but I'm just going to kind of point out as being probably a good place to look into. The first is the Directory of Associations. And why I point this one out is because a lot of times, so first, let me start with the definition. So industries, right? Industries and professions have what's called a professional association. So like I said earlier, I'm a librarian, right? So my professional association is the American Library Association, right? So there are literally 50,000 librarians who belong to the American Library Association. You have associations like like this one that I pulled up here, the American Veterinary Medical Association, right? These associations are really helpful because they do a lot of research about businesses and about customers, right, that fall into this category. So the AVMA talks about pet ownership. It talks about how much money people spend on vet bills each year. It talks about how much money people spend on dog food each year. So these professional associations, not only are they just associations that, you know, lobby on our behalf as a veterinarian or as a small business owner or as a librarian, they also do a lot of research about who are the buyers, who are the users. And so I always recommend using the Directory of Associations to find out more about, you know, your industry, because they will talk about, you know, what's trending, what's the latest need, and then also give you different data points that are going to be helpful. The second one that I just want to point out is this one down here. It's called Thomas, which is not a good description at all, but Thomas for Industry. This is a really neat resource because it is a directory. So directory, I know that you guys are a lot younger than me and I'm dating myself, but for any of you who have used an old school telephone book, Thomas for Industry is kind of like that. It's a directory, right? And this will identify manufacturers. It will identify product catalogs. So like, just like you would shop on Amazon for different products, it's going to identify the people who manufacture certain products, right? And then it'll help you identify who's manufacturing what, right? And then give you price points. So both of these two resources will also come in handy when you're thinking about channels of communication, when you're thinking about just other research and data that might be useful to incorporate into the requirements for the semifinals. And so those are the four things that I just wanted to touch on today. But back on the homepage, like I said, when I first started, check in with me, check in with your local librarian, whether it be at a college or at your high school. You can contact me through using any of these features. Happy to help, just like Anne and Carrie provide, you know, a Zoom consultation. And I'm happy to field any questions that anyone might have.
All right, thank you, Jess. I think it is crystal clear now why everyone is not your customer and how they can go about finding out who their customer is. So thank you very much for showing them those free resources. I think that that's really important to reiterate. Use your local library, your high school, your college. If you find something that has a price tag on it, please reach out to us. Don't just go ahead and pay for something. More than likely, Jess can help you find whatever it is you need or something similar for free. That is what we are here to do, is to help you. So please don't be scared to ask questions, ask for help. And I did want to quickly add in the chat what Carrie White brought up earlier, West Virginia Business Link, which is a network of resources across the state of West Virginia. Again, I know that websites can be overwhelming. If you see something on there that you're going, oh man, I'd really love a connection to someone in Beckley, we can help you. We can connect you. So please reach out to us. That is what we are here to do. It is our pleasure to connect you to whoever and whatever resources that you need to be successful. Any questions for Jess? Okay. All right, guys. Well, we are almost done. I just have a couple more things to show you. Jess, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. All right. So guys, I'm going to talk about the rubric really quickly. Dallas will be attaching this in the email with the video, so you can read through every single word of this. But basically, everything that we talked about today needs to be in your submission. Talking about everything in the business model canvas, as you can see on the left, the key partners, the resources. And what I think you really need to think about when you're filling this out, when you're writing your 5 pages, are the things that Anne talked about and what Jess talked about. How can I prove what I said? Really falling in love with the problem and not the solution, and not just saying, I think this. You can say, you know what, I conducted 10 interviews, which by the way, that's the minimum. You can do more. I conducted 10 interviews, and here's what my interviews told me. Here's what I found out from my customer. And it is okay to say, you know what, I thought this in the beginning, but after listening to 10 customers, I've got to pivot. You know what, this is not the right direction. And the judges are going to respect that more than standing behind something that you assumed. Saying, you know what, I did my research, I interviewed customers, and my assumptions were wrong. So here's how I pivoted. Here's what I'm going to do. Don't feel like you are trapped into whatever you submitted in round 1. The idea is we want you to grow. We want you to pivot that idea through the competition. If what you entered in round 1 doesn't look like it does in round 3, that's okay. We want you to fail fast, figure out what works, and just really focus on that problem and not the solution. So again, this rubric will be sent out after the workshop. So we'll get that out to you tomorrow. Dallas will be sending in the chat a Sign Up Genius link. We would like to speak to every single team individually. So that's in the high school and in the college competition. If you would like to have your coach on the call, that's fine. So just make sure whenever you're signing up that both of your, as many team members as you have, as many coaches as you have, please have as many people as possible on that call. Dallas and I are going to be splitting them up. So we have tons of availability. We want to get these done before Christmas. And just one thing to think about. So as I mentioned, the WVU Launch Lab has graciously offered to coach every single team in the high school and college competition. You can have additional coaches. So if you have a teacher or a family member or someone from the industry that really, is passionate about what you're doing, you can have as many coaches as you have. You are not restricted in that. So just something to think about. If you need help finding a subject matter expert from industry, reach out to us. We are happy to help you connect. And all of this will be emailed out as well. These are just reminders. Another reminder, we have resources on our website. We do want you to read the book, Talking to Humans. It is free. It's talkingtohumans.com, and we will be sending that out as well. It is a very quick, short and easy read. Please go ahead and start reading that. I would suggest reading this book before you do your customer interviews. We just want to make sure that you guys are aware that we are on social media. We have Instagram and Facebook. Something that's different, if you guys have participated in the past, we now have one Instagram and one Facebook. So we don't have the high school and college separated out anymore. So it's just business plan, West Virginia business plan. And on Facebook, it's the West Virginia business plan competition. And if we could just quickly, if everyone could take put your camera on, so we could just take a quick picture and post it on social media, tag yourselves. Come on, gang. Here we go. Hey, everyone's here. Good to know that you guys are still listening. Loving this. All right,
I do have a quick question before we go though. Miss White, did you and Miss Jones, I believe that was her name, you guys said that you'll leave your contact information after the meeting, correct?
Yes, we can put it in the chat. Or Tara, did you say you were going to send it out or something?
Yes, we'll email it out, but if you want to throw it in the chat as well,
I'll put it in the
can't
chat.
have it too
I'll
many
put
places.
mine in the chat. And
Okay.
Yeah.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions before we start cheesing? Okay, well, I'm going to stop the video for